Hello, hello, George L. Masri here. Well Off Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I interviewed Edna Keep. This was my first time having a conversation with Edna, but it was truly full of information, and I really enjoyed all of her knowledge. She's been doing this a long time. It was so cool to hear about the different strategies that she employs. So for those that don't know, Edna is a multi-unit investor. She was telling me her story about how when she started, she had a goal of buying 6 duplexes in 1 year. And then the person she was working with just said, why don't you go into multi-units? And then she had to make a complete mindset shift in order to be able to get to that level. So we talk a little bit about that. We talk about the mindset shifts. We talk about the 5-step investor attraction system. We talk about vendor takebacks, how to make deals work, multi-units specifically, and how to get financing through CMHC with a high ratio mortgage, and then get a VTB in a second position. So we broke down the process. How do you negotiate that with the sellers, especially given the sellers market that we're in? So if you're into multi-unit investing and you want to figure out how to get into a deal without putting so much money into it by reducing your initial investment, there's going to be lots of good stuff in here for you. So I hope you enjoy. If you are interested in connecting with me to talk about multi-unit investing in Niagara, so we're talking about Welland, St. Catharines, I do a lot of marketing there, so I'm always looking for opportunities. I'm happy to connect with you to discuss how we can work together. You can go to welloff.ca and then contact me through there. And you can also download some free reports by going to welloff.ca/report. And finally, one last thing I want to share with you. If you've been listening to the show and you enjoy it, I would ask you to leave us a review, especially on the Apple Podcasts app. So if you can log in on your iPhone or Mac or whatever Apple product you have and leave us a review there, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for sharing this with your family and friends. I hope you're enjoying it. And here is the episode. Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I am here with Edna Keep today. And for those that don't know, Edna is a former certified financial planner, and she discovered the power of real estate in 2007. Since then, her and her husband have amassed $65 million in real estate. So their portfolio is worth $65 million in multifamily and using other people's money, OPM. Since 2014, she's been training and coaching entrepreneurs who want to scale up their real estate business into multifamily with other people's money. So Edna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. So I like to start off, Edna, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and 1 or 2 things you remember from then.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised on a farm north of Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, so northern Saskatchewan. I have 6 brothers and 1 sister, so we always had a very full house. And you know what? I always had a lot of fun with my brothers. My sister was pretty much grown and she actually had her own baby before I was born. But we had a lot of fun on the farm. We played a lot of sports and we had our own team, so we could even do it without having friends over.
Oh, that's cool. Isn't Russ, I don't know if you know Russell Westcott.
I do.
He's from Saskatchewan too,
Yeah,
I believe.
he is. Yeah. He moved away though. I'm still here.
Oh yeah, that's cool. So did you get a lot of snow out there? Or is it
not always where we're from, because we're just outside of the city of Regina, so it's southern. In northern Saskatchewan, where I'm from, we get lots. But this year we actually have a decent amount. So my husband and my kids really like skidooing, so they've been able to skidoo right from the yard. But most of the time they have to drive, 3-4 hours to really get the decent snow.
Oh, okay, cool. So I'm just curious because I've never actually been to Saskatchewan. What would, if I were to go visit, what would I do? What would be something that would draw me in?
It depends what time of the year you come, but in Saskatchewan, we have some of the most beautiful lakes around, especially northern Saskatchewan, where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever come, that's what I would recommend is, go get a campsite or a cottage even, and spend some time at the lakes because, fishing, water sports, boating, it's just beautiful up there.
Cool. That sounds good. So is there anything like just a memory that stands out to you as a child that you'll never forget and that you just think about from time to time?
Well, you know what? Not unless somebody asks me a question, but I really enjoyed being brought up with brothers. We built forts, we made lifeboats, and we played cod frogs in the slough. Like I was a bit of a tomboy, so That always kind of, people will say, how'd you end up in such a male dominated industry? I said, I think
Right.
it's because I was raised with 6 brothers.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Are any of your siblings investors as well?
Yep. My brother, just older than me, has quite a few rental properties, and he's done a lot of fixing and flipping as well.
Mhm.
And then another brother has bought, when the US had their, kind of strange market there back in 07, 08,
Yeah.
he bought a few properties and they still own them to this day, rent them out. Phoenix and Las Vegas are the areas that they
Cool.
bought in.
Cool. Good
Mhm.
for them. Good for them.
But not to the extent we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay. So tell me a little bit about your story. 65 million in real estate assets. That's pretty impressive. How did you get there? You said you started in 2007. What was that journey like?
Well, we took some education classes, and how I kind of found that was I had clients coming in, and I sold mutual funds. So they were all
Mhm.
invested mutual funds, but they started telling me that they were doing real estate on the side and bought a house or, this and that. And I just had been listening, of course, in our area in that market. The market was pretty good. And so we decided to take a class. We took a class, and then it ended up being a weekend class. And then we signed up for the year-long program with the Rich Dad Poor Dad group. And, it really started from there. It really woke us up to what was possible. I wasn't even aware of real estate as an investment until that point. I would say when you're trained by one group, and I was trained by mutual fund people to sell mutual funds, your blinders are on. And some people, like I learned after, they were dabbling in other things, but I very much had the blinders on for a lot of years. That was the only investment we did, the only investment we sold.
Mhm. Yeah, and obviously to go from mutual funds to investing in real estate, I know that your story involves multi-units. How did you get into multi-units? Did you just start off with single family homes or did you just dive right in?
We started with single family homes because what I find is that most in training out there is about single family homes. It's kind of a natural progression. And but we learned very early on. Actually, we owned 50 doors within 18 months of starting, and the last purchase was a 24 unit, and that's what basically doubled our portfolio with one purchase. And it was like, wow, that was pretty amazing to me. It was like our cash flow increased a lot. It was no harder to get the financing for the multifamily as it was to get the financing for the houses. And then shortly after that, we actually got cut off from houses. We couldn't even get financing
Mhm.
for houses anymore. So that's what I find is a lot of people get cut off on houses. And if you still want to grow, you pretty much have to move into multifamily.
Right, exactly. Do you still think that starting with single family homes is a good thing to do? Because I know, I believe one of the things you teach people is how to skip the single families and go right into multi units.
Yeah, we didn't know it was possible when we started. And I still remember the very first conversation I had with the realtor. And he said, I was telling him my goal, I want to buy 12 duplexes that year. And he said, Edna, why don't you just buy a multifamily? And I go, well, I can't. I said, I don't even own enough houses yet. Like I honestly thought I had to own, like kind of like Monopoly or something. I thought I had to own a certain amount before we could scale up. Like
Mm,
I think a lot of people think I got to build my equity in houses so that I have equity to possibly buy into multifamily. But if we were to start over today, we would go straight into multifamily. And and I've had several students that have done that, just go straight into multifamily, skip the single families altogether. And there's a few benefits to do that. One is multifamily is treated like a business, so it's financed like a business if the numbers
mhm,
don't work. And they also don't look at you so much. They look at, does the building cover itself?
mhm.
Investors like it better because it's actually treated like a business. And you can talk about it like a business. And the numbers are larger, so it makes more sense. And there's more than one person on the mortgage usually, as opposed to with a single family home, it's one person and one person only,
Mhm.
or maybe a couple. And the other thing I like about it is, you got 12, 14, 24 people paying your mortgage off for you. So you get one or two vacancies and it's not a big deal, but you do
Yeah.
that with a house and it's a big deal.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So I know part of what we were going to discuss was your 5-step investor attraction system on that note, because obviously for somebody who's starting out, if they want to get into multi units, then either they have to have the capital to do it or they have to learn how to raise the capital. So can we dive into your 5-step system?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think what it takes is a mindset shift
Hmm.
because dealing with larger buildings, larger amounts of money, and other people's money, especially, you've got to have a certain level of confidence that you really know what you're doing. And I think that's why a lot of times people start on the single family is they want to, get comfortable with the whole process
Hmm.
initially to be able to figure it out before they move on to anything bigger. So the mindset shift is a big thing. And we spend a lot of time on that because that's probably the biggest thing. Because even now, when people approach me and they go, well, I'm kind of thinking multifamily, but oh, do I have enough houses? Do I have enough experience? So the biggest thing is that mindset shift,
Hmm.
and then just thinking about going bigger. So going big makes a big difference. You buy 18 doors, it's a lot more money that you're dealing with. Investor capital you have to deal with. There's different risk levels that you have to deal with, stuff like that. And then the other thing is really building that confidence, because another thing that people say to me all the time is, well, if people are, if they have the money, why wouldn't they just do it themselves? I know I would if I had the money. Why wouldn't I just do it myself? And the fact is, again, there's a lot of people out there that would love to invest in real estate, but they maybe are already in a job that they love or make really good money at. So they've got the money to invest in it, but no time
Hmm.
or interest. But once you start educating people on what's possible in the real estate world, that changes as well. Because right now, the biggest portion of investments out there in stocks and bonds and mutual funds. Well, why is that? Well, that's because what's more majority of people sell.
Hmm.
You know, and when you start talking to people about real estate, there's a lot of people that would love to,
Hmm.
but don't know even where to begin. So getting that confidence to say, I have a good deal. I understand. I know that this is a good deal. That's another big step, because if you go to a potential investor and say, I'm just starting. I'm brand new. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I
Hmm.
want to use your money to do it. They're just going to laugh at you. It's like, I
Yeah,
don't think so. That doesn't make
exactly.
any sense. So really building your own confidence to get to the point where you understand that it's a good deal and that you can, that actually make money with the deal. Because I mean, things can go sideways. You got to know what you're doing, not just in the purchase but managing it long term, because we're more
Hmm.
into the long term buy and hold. Even if we fix it up, we keep it so we don't sell it off, and then there's tax reasons and different stuff like that.
Sure.
And then how many did I cover off there? Three. I'm just trying to think. So the five steps that I talk about is also finding and analyzing the right deal, because that makes a big difference too. You can't not every deal is as it's presented. As a matter of fact, the majority of the deals as presented are not even true. They make up a pro forma that the numbers are
Hmm.
not even real.
Yeah.
And so there's a step that I show students how to, go ahead and make the offer on the property, because you're not going to get in the building and get all the details ahead of time like you do with a house anyway. So finding and analyzing the deal is really important. Also finding or analyzing the area. So once you have a deal that you think is going to work, you also have to analyze the area, because the numbers can make sense on paper, but you have to decide if the headaches you want to deal with in some of those areas you're working in are worth the numbers. Sometimes people like to buy newer property because they attract more the professional tenant, not professional tenant, professional. You want to stay away from the professional tenants,
Yeah.
but then there's a lot of people that really cater to social services. We don't. I just don't like the whole mentality, or the kind of attitudes. They don't know how to take care of your places so much. A professional person, somebody who's a homeowner, in their homeowner comes from a homeowner family, is much more apt to know how to take care of your property, as opposed to somebody who's been a renter their whole lives. So that's another really really big one. And then understanding too that you don't find the deal necessarily. Lots of
Hmm.
times you create the deal,
Hmm.
and you create the deal by first of all understanding what the heck you're doing, and then um, being able to buy deals with other people's money really gives you an infinite return as long as you're making the money for the investors and stuff like that. So really understanding that, and when you look at it as the whole package, it really is the mindset around becoming a multi-million million-dollar real estate investor is what's going to take you there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So if we go back to some of the things you talked about here, one of the first things you mentioned was a mindset shift.
Biggest one.
Yeah, the biggest one. And it sounds like what you were referring to was understanding the numbers, knowing the deal, and presenting yourself with a lot of confidence. Is there anything else? What are some of the common things that beginner investors might believe in that may not be or that require the biggest shift?
Well, one is that they can do it. I still have a lot of students that say, like, much like we thought at the initial, well, I don't have enough houses yet, or I don't have a house yet.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I've even taken to a couple students that didn't even own their own house yet and helped them buy like 72 units within a couple years. And I still remember I had to laugh because they're phoning to get the utilities in their name, which you have to do when you take ownership of the building. And they're going like, you own one unit in the building? Like the people at the energy and power couldn't even understand what they were doing. No, I own the whole building.
Yeah.
And you don't have any other utilities in your name ever before? No, we still live at home with their parents. So, that was a mindset shift for those guys. They first initially started looking at a single family home in a cheap area of the city because they had to think about the amount of money that they were going to use.
Mm-hmm.
And when they realized that they couldn't even get out of the vehicle in the evening, they did during the day, but in the evening they were scared to. They went, yeah, I think this is probably not an area we want to invest in.
Right. Well, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I mean really about a mindset shift is you have to realize it's doable, and then you have to understand how and why it's doable. And then that's where I covered it off into the rest of the thing is why people want to invest with you, where you find the money, and sometimes you have to teach people even that they have money, because a lot of people don't realize that equity in your own home or equity in a business could be accessed as money they could invest. A lot of people don't realize that either.
You're right. One of the things that I actually read before we got together on camera here was the idea of creating $5,000 of income. And I forget what the timeline was that you put specifically. I think it was something like 18 months or so.
We did ours in 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you kind of tell us what the strategy would be for somebody right now who maybe has a couple of properties and they want to get to that 5,000 a month in cash flow?
Absolutely. And what I'm going to use there, because we did it 13 years ago, we did it in 18 months, but we started, the first half of them were houses. So it took a little longer because, 100 a door is kind of what we were getting.
Mm-hmm.
And so with half of that, we had, 2,000 a month or whatever. And then we moved to the multifamily and we ended up with another 2,500 a month. But I have students right now, and just to give you an example, within 6 months of starting with me, they took possession of their first 12-unit apartment building that cash flowed them $3,000 a month. Nice. So basically, one or two buildings like that in a year is going to give you what you need. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to look in the areas that's going to give that to you, because there's a lot of areas out there where real estate's a decent investment, especially in Ontario. A lot of people come to me from Ontario because they've got all this cash that they built up as equity in their home, mm-hmm. and they want to do something, but they can't buy anything in Toronto that even makes sense. So they got to look at outlying areas. I had one a realtor actually from Ontario, from Toronto, and she bought her first 9-unit apartment building just outside of Toronto, about an hour. When she bought it, 7 of the 9 units were vacant. Mm-hmm. So she couldn't get traditional financing. So we worked with the vendor and got vendor financing. Of course, at the beginning, they wouldn't agree to it. But once they understood that we couldn't get traditional financing because it was vacant, 7 out of the 9 were vacant, then we educated them on the process. She bought the building, got 900,000 vendor financing, put mm-hmm. 200,000 down, fixed up the property, and got it fully rented. And she's going to make 5,500 a month cash flow on that one little 9-unit building. Yeah,
that's great.
So and that was her first deal. And she started with me, I believe, in June. She took possession of that property in December. And that was last December, not
Yeah, yeah.
last December, December 2019.
Yes.
And it took her 14 months to get them all fixed up and refinanced. So it took her 14 months to get to this point. But 2 years in, $5,500 a month cash for her first deal.
Yeah, I think I know the person you're talking
Oh,
about.
do
I'm
you?
pretty sure I
Okay.
do.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
who that
yeah,
is. So that's
yeah.
great.
Katira. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yes.
her. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I love hearing stories like that, especially knowing her story and all the things that have happened. I mean, I don't know it that well, but I know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a really interesting story because a lot of people won't take on a vacant building because they can't get it financed traditionally,
Mhm.
and it was just a different way of thinking, and you cannot go in because I've seen people do it every time, brand new investor, and they're going, "Hey, I want you to finance your own building." Well, you can't say it like that. There's just a certain way you have to say it too, where it makes sense to them.
Mhm.
So we get a lot of vendor financing that I've heard other people say, uh, I tried getting vendor financing on that same building you guys got. How'd you do that?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
my student in Saskatoon, she said she
Yeah.
told her story after she was sharing it in like a webinar format to attract investors, which is something I teach. And she said, after a bunch of other real estate investors reached out to her and said, "How the heck did you get a vendor take back? I tried on that building. They wouldn't even look at me." Well,
Mhm.
because they didn't know how to do it properly. So that's a big deal too, knowing how
Can
to
you
do it properly.
actually dive into that? Because I've taken some workshops on vendor takebacks, so I know all the semantics. I haven't done one yet. I understand very well how they work, but I do kind of get that sort of reaction that you're saying when I do approach somebody and ask for a vendor takeback. They often don't understand what it means. They're confused. They want to stay away from it because they just don't get it. So it makes it a bit challenging
Yeah.
sometimes to work with it. So I'm just curious, are you able to share a little bit
Yeah,
of,
you know
yeah.
what? I'll tell you the live deals, the two ones I just talked about. I'll tell you exactly how it happened. So the couple in Saskatoon know that first you get the building under, actually they all know, you get the building under contract first. You do not go in ahead of time and say, "I want you to hold financing as part of your offer." You don't do that. You make a straight out offer.
Okay.
Then in Amanda's case from Saskatoon, she approached them about vendor financing. They did not know what it was. They said they didn't know what it was because of the terminology and stuff.
Mhm.
But in talking to them back and forth a few different times, she actually learned that back when they bought those properties in the 80s, they actually got vendor financing, but they didn't know that that's what it was called. All
Yes.
they knew, so a lot of it is just being able to explain what it actually is. And what it actually is the seller holding some of the financing.
Yes.
And then, so that's part of it. So being able to just explain it. And so she got it under contract, started working on financing. It was a while before she asked for the vendor financing, but she built the conversation in slowly. What are you going to do when you retire? Because this couple was retiring. Some people, it's not an option because they're going on to buy more buildings and they need their
Mhm.
cash. But in this case, the couple was retiring. They'd owned the building for 20 years. It was the last of a few that they were selling, and so just in the conversation she learned that they were just going to retire and travel, and she asked them like, well, and what, when you get your money, are you just going to leave it in a bank, or what are you thinking? Well, you know what, we haven't really even thought that far ahead. But real estate investors are predisposed to invest in real estate. So if you
Yes.
think about that, what are they going to do when they get their money? Are they going to put it in the stock market? Yeah, not likely, because they didn't like the stock market in the first place. That's why they got in real estate. Do they
Mhm.
like the returns? The safety may be offered in term deposits or GICs, yeah, but not the return. And when they're used to a decent return from their building, all of a sudden that dries up, and something where they were getting a decent monthly income, now there's next to nothing.
Mhm.
So just being able to explain that understandably, and then offer them a decent rate of return, and then how also they need to get it back. Because if you just give them as, yeah, I just want to keep your money forever, chances are slim they're going to do that as well. So you got to
Yeah.
give them the plan on how you're going to pay them back. So, and in most cases, it's when you refinance the property out in 5 or 10 years that they get their principal back.
Right. Okay. So just to kind of recap here a little bit, and I'm assuming that in this example that you were just referring to, this was an off-market property. I don't think that there would be another realtor involved in this.
Yeah, this
Correct?
was off market. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So you do an offer first with just like a due diligence condition or whatever, no mention whatsoever of the VTB. And then you get it under contract. I would assume somewhere between 30 to 60 days would probably be typical in that situation.
That you go back to them?
No, that you'd get a due diligence condition for a period of that sort of thing, or
90 to 120 days.
90 to 120 days.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that period of time, at some point, maybe not so early on, maybe at the 60-day mark or something like that, you would approach them and say, hey, I've tried getting financing from the bank and they're saying they won't do it because of the vacancies or because of this or that. So I thought of a solution that could work, and you explain the vendor take back. Is that kind of how it would work?
Except let's keep the Ontario and the Saskatchewan one apart, because there was two different scenarios there. So the Saskatchewan one was full. And she was able to get 85% financing at CMHC. So then she came back to them and she said, so I was able to get 85% financing through CMHC, but where I'm struggling is that my investing partners, I'm a little bit shy on what I can get there. So I'm just wondering if you guys would be open. And then she explained how it worked. And at first it was like, well, yeah, we'd rather you just get investors. And then she came back again. And in the long run, she negotiated a 13% vendor financing on that deal. So 85% from the CMHC, 13% vendor financing. So she just had to do 2% and closing costs to get the deal done. So that one was fully operational turnkey property. There was not much work to be done. They kept some reserves to the side just in case, because there was a couple of people had been there a really long time, and they would want to when they moved out or passed on or whatever happened, they would need to update the units in there. But so that's the one side of it. And really at that point, it was like, you know what, the CMHC is going to give us 85% financing. When she explained how that works, like getting CMHC insured loan is a really good loan, because you got to go through extra stringent, diligence on yourself, your building, everything else to be able to qualify. So them knowing that and her explaining it in a way that they could understand it is what allowed her to get the vendor finance on it.
Sure.
Then it was like, yeah. They showed them how the building could afford to pay them, and like I said, they were gone. They were wanting to retire. They didn't want to do the work anymore. They were willing, ready to jump in and start managing it, and they could show them that the building could afford to pay them out of the cash flow as well.
Awesome. Was this an example that happened a few years ago, or is this a recent example?
Recent. Yeah. She took possession of that property last March. So okay. 9 months ago, or almost 10 months ago now, because it's ended early February, but she took possession late March and mid-April. They're working on their second unit right now. Second 12 units can pay them about $3,000 a month cash flow too. But so that's the one way. And then let's talk about the one in Ontario. So that one was vacant. We knew going in that there's no way we could get financing on it. But if you try to tell a seller that up front, they're just going to think that you're using that as a ploy, right? Mm-hmm. So she got under contract, built a bit of a relationship with them. The couple who owned the property had ended up in a nursing home, actually. So the son was looking after things. He didn't want to be looking after things. And she went back and she said, I can take possession, give you a $200,000 non-refundable deposit, but I need you to hold financing because I can't get financing on a 7 of the 9 units vacant building, and I don't have the cash to buy it outright. And at that point, it was like, oh, well, that makes sense, because there was an actual reason, not just I want to use your money. There was a reason. And then she also had a plan. She said, so I've got a renovation team pulled together. I'd like to keep the vendor financing in place for 14 months because I think that's how long it's going to take me to get it renovated and apply for CMHC financing. And that's exactly what happened. And I talked to her a couple of weeks ago here, and she bought that for 1.1. put a 200,000 non-refundable deposit, and my numbers could be a little bit off, but this was the plan at the beginning. About 200,000 into renovations. She was able to refinance it at 1.85 million.
Wow.
55 and 5,500 cash flow. So again, it's just you know, you have to almost train your seller on why it has to happen. It's not just because I want it, just because I want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. That's amazing. That result is really, really good. When you talk about having a plan and sharing that with the seller, is that something, do you create like a business plan? Do you put it on paper, or is it just something that you communicate with them verbally?
No, we put it on paper because that vendor financing stays in like first mortgage position. So it's like and plus she give a $200,000 non-refundable deposit. So if it didn't work, they were just $200,000 ahead with probably a partially renovated building. So
Right.
how could they really lose? So you have to make it a real no lose situation for them too.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. I've never heard of anyone doing it that way, but I like the way I like the way you've structured that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, obviously you've done this before with clients, and it makes sense to do it that way. And I've never actually heard anyone say before that you shouldn't approach a seller directly with the vendor take back. You should get it
Upfront.
under contract first. It
Mm-hmm.
makes sense because you put down a deposit, you probably do your inspections, and you might need to do your environmental tests. So you're committing to this process, and you're hoping that the seller sees your commitment and works with you at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so the other thing I was going to ask you, you mentioned CMHC 85% loan to value. And then in the first example, a 13% VTB, leaving her with only basically 2% out of pocket plus closing costs. Is that something that happens with CMHC? Because I don't believe any other lender, from what I know, would allow a VTB in second position bring you up to 98% loan to value.
You know what? That's the only time I've seen it happen because I even told my student, I said, you know what? Even though you negotiated 13, there's probably a good chance you're only going to be able to use 5% of it because the lenders and CMHC are going to want to see you have 10% in the game,
Yeah.
which was typical because, you know, we've done it before. So yeah, with her specific deal, she ended up with 13%. And I think part of it was because they did have such a strong deal too. Like
Yeah.
the deal was really strong, you know, so I wouldn't say it's typical. No, definitely not typical. I haven't even got a 13% vendor take back on, you know, we've got 10 actually, and then done in a creative way because the lender would only allow 5. But yeah, she got 13, and the lender was aware. CMHC was aware. It was all upfront. There was nothing hidden. She just said, I negotiated it. Can I use it? And right up until almost the end, she didn't know if she was going to be able to use it, and then they allowed her.
Awesome. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it
So it
is.
was
Yeah.
a 13% VTB in second position, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yes.
Do you happen to know, I don't know if you can share this or not, but do you know what the interest was on the VTB?
I think the interest was 6% on the vendor take back, and her CMHC financing was 1.6, say around
Wow.
1.5, 1.6, 35-year amortization.
Wow.
Mhm.
Beautiful. And the only way that I can imagine a deal like that would work is if there is substantial cash flow, right?
Yeah, exactly. Had to be able to pay everything, and it did.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
she had really good insurance. She just really got a sweet deal there. And you know, you don't always get those every day, but even just understanding it and going after it is a mindset shift. You know, like we talked about that quite a bit before it actually transpired. I've even had clients who, you know, right up until like a couple weeks before they were supposed to remove conditions, they were kind of saying, "I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm not sure this is going to work." And some of the mindset exercises that I give the students is, you know, whatever you focus on, you're going to get. So let's
Yeah.
change that focus to absolutely I'm going to get this, absolutely I'm going to get this, and things just happen. You know, in this one particular case, I'm thinking a 6 unit in Innisfil, Alberta. She was like that right up till the, you know, couple weeks. And then she was still thinking I might not have enough money raised from my investors. And then between the vendor financing, CMHC financing, and what the magic the mortgage broker was able to do, it all came together at the end. So, just you have to be careful what you're thinking about too. If you're always going through life thinking, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. Guess what? You can't do that, So that's also part of the mindset shift that people have to start realizing.
For sure. I was just thinking as you were talking about CMHC, how do you suggest going about developing a relationship with a CMHC mortgage broker? It's pretty, like, there's a lot of mortgage brokers out there, but very few that represent CMHC, or at least not so many that I know of. What would you suggest doing in that case?
Well, that's part of building your power team, which is something everybody has to do, whichever area you decide to work in. You got to build your power team. So that's one of the questions that's on our questionnaire. Like, do you have experience with CMHC financing? And if you don't, it probably not much good to me.
Right. Cool. So would you just suggest reaching out to your network, seeing who the CMHC contact is that people are working with, and then just starting a relationship with that person?
Yeah, referrals. Just like any, realtors, we always suggest to our my students that you should be dealing with people on your power team that actually own real estate. So if you can find a realtor that actually owns rental real estate, you can find a mortgage broker that actually owns rental real estate. It just takes everything to a whole new level because they understand it. Same with your accountant, your lawyer. They understand it because they've been through it. And I know everybody wants to help out their sister-in-law and their cousin and their brand new, blah, blah, blah. But those are not necessarily your best people. I still remember one of my students a few years ago, I was helping her buy a house. And I told her, like, use this realtor that I'm recommending to you because they actually know what they're talking about. Well, she had a cousin or a friend of her daughter's or something. And you know what? She ended up bugging the other realtor for advice because this one didn't know what the hell she was doing. So you it's nice as you want to be to your little cousin or your cousin's friend or whatever. That's to your detriment. And if you want to do it, go ahead. We did the same thing when we very first started. We had a really good friend that helped us buy our house, really liked him, wanted to help, get him to help us with rental real estate. He didn't understand it. And lost us a lot of deals because of it. So, your decision, I say, but it doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, I know you want to help your cousin, but here, why don't you do this? Do it the right way, and then just go give him $1,000 because you'll save that. Not to mention the hassle and the headache. Just give them some money if you really want to do something.
Exactly, or the realtor that they're working with could potentially give them a bit of a referral fee as well to help out the cousin or whatever, right?
Well, the thing is, they found the deal, actually helped them find the deal through a private person, but they wanted to work with their cousin to, do the paperwork. You know what I mean? They're just trying to help them make some money. That's all. Yeah.
It's understandable, but what you're saying makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all do it.
For sure. We've all been there, and I understand it.
Yeah.
So we covered a lot of things today. I think there was a lot of good stuff in here that I haven't heard from anyone else, actually. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to jump into the next section, unless there was any final thoughts that you want to share.
No, that's pretty good. Most of the ones we work with, we do try to get CMHC financing. Doesn't always work, but the majority of them, it kind of puts a little bit more peace on you, knowing that you've got that kind of coverage on your building.
Beautiful. I love that idea of getting 85% and possibly a bit of a vendor take back too, to really reduce your initial investment.
It makes it a lot easier to buy more and more buildings, the least amount of money you have to put in, and more ownership for you too. Amanda, she could have potentially done that building 100% on her own. In the long run, she chose to allow her investor to stay in because she actually had worked on raising capital in the meantime, because she didn't know that was all going to be offered. And in the long run, she could have just did it on her own, but it didn't make sense to let the investor go. Again, this is something that people need to learn as well. It was a good deal. She could have kept it all to herself. the lawyer had already been introduced to it, like who was also her investor was a lawyer, to take it away and say, well, I don't need you anymore, doesn't really make sense either, because he could be a potential investor in 3 or 4 or 5 deals.
Yeah.
And so you keep the best deal for yourself, and maybe the next one's not so sweet. Well, that doesn't give people a good taste in their mouth either.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The idea is to share more with people. There's a quote from Stefan Arniel from his book, which said, I'd rather consume a watermelon I'd rather, share a watermelon than consume a grape.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with multifamily. And I always say I'd rather own 25% of 4 deals than 100% of 1 too, because,
Definitely.
Different markets, different structures, different things going on in the area. So yeah, it reduces your risk again.
Yeah. And then you can create that system and then just recreate this process over and over and develop those relationships, and it just grows from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's where it grows.
Okay, so Edna, let's jump into the next section, the random 5. I'm going to ask you 5 random questions, and you just tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Sure.
Okay, number 1, what board game do you like the most?
Cash Flow 101, Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh, of course. That's an easy one. Number 2, your favorite day of the week?
Monday. Yeah.
That's a lot of people's least favorite. I like your answer.
Because I love my work, I Sunday's a nice relaxing day, but it doesn't energize me like going to work does.
Yeah, perfect. Number 3, what time do you normally go to bed?
10.
It's a good time. Not too late, not too early. Number 4, if you were in a witness protection program, what would be your new name and where would you go?
Oh boy, well, that's a tough one. I've never thought of that before. You know what? I would just stay in my own house because I actually don't mind this whole lockdown thing. I love my house. It's my favorite place on earth, including my office. So I would just stay home. And what was the second question?
What would be your new name and where would you go? So you'd stay in your home. What would be your new name?
I'd call myself the housekeeper. I'm just a housekeeper. I'm just a housekeeper.
That's it. Well, that's 100% protection right there.
Yeah. No, they don't live here. A housekeeper.
All right. And number 5, what success principle do you live by?
Win-win.
Win-win. I like it. Edna, this was awesome. Before I let you go, I'd like to ask you, how do people reach you and what services do you provide?
Sure. Well, there's a few ways to reach me. I'm on Facebook, Coach Edna Keep. My email address is edna@ednakeep.com. And my website is ednakeep.com. So those are the 3 best ways. The number 1 service that I provide is I have a program called 90 Days to 5K. Mm-hmm. The premise behind it is that in 90 days, it's going to teach you exactly what you need to know to be making $5,000 a month in passive income through multifamily investing. And a lot of times that includes vendor financing and other people's money. It doesn't have to take you forever. You can have that happen to you within a year. We did it in 18 months, but we start on single family home. You start on multi. Sometimes it can happen for you in your first deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding, I don't know about your market, are you guys in a seller's market right now? And
no, we're kind of more in a buyer's market right now, like Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba areas where most of our stuff is. But we also started buying in Memphis, Tennessee recently. And we got doors down there at 21, the last 178 units we have under contract, 21.6 a door.
Wow.
Yeah, you can't even buy a parking spot for that in Toronto.
Oh, for sure. That's cool. I like that. Yeah, the more I interview people, the more I'm finding out that there's a lot of people that are investing abroad. Yeah. Like there's people like say in New York City that are investing in Memphis and this and that. So it's cool to see all that happening.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of places where you just can't make it cash flow, even with financing and stuff. I had a lady approach me recently and she had a 12 unit in Toronto valued at 2.5 million, but she had a 600,000 mortgage on it. It could only put another 600,000 mortgage on it. And the reason is because there's no cash flow to pay for it, so the value's there, but there's no cash flow. And for most people that I talk to, they're interested in that cash flow. Like there's people out there that just want to build wealth or have a safe place to keep their money. But the majority of people want cash flow to replace that day-to-day income or just have the extra to do stuff with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Edna, thank you so much for everything you shared today.
You're my pleasure.
And I look forward to having another conversation with you soon.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, you take care. And it was nice being on.
Same here. Take care. Thanks once again for listening to another episode of the Well Off Podcast. Just want to remind you that if you do appreciate the content, all I ask is that you comment, maybe like it if you can on the platform that you're listening to it on, and finally share it with friends and family. I'd love to get the message out there, and it would mean a lot if you can share it. And finally, I just wanted to offer you, as a valued listener, a free copy to the Roadmap to Real Estate Investing, which is a document that I've put together which helps you identify what strategy would best suit your needs at this current time. You go over certain things that are included in this document step by step, and it'll hopefully provide you with some clarity. So have a look. You can go to www.welloff.ca/guide to download your free copy.